So today we're going to be looking at rearranging formulae, otherwise known as changing the subject. So to get a better idea of what we mean by changing the subject, we can think about it in terms of English. So in English we can change the subject of a sentence. Let's look at one sentence. The cat sat on the mat. Okay, now in this sentence, cat is the subject. We could rearrange that sentence to make mat the subject. This would become, the mat was sat on by the cat. So now you can see that mat is the subject. It's the same for equations. Well, not the same, but similar. In these two equations, so a equals 4r plus 9, a is the subject in that equation. Yeah. For the next equation, g is equal to mv, g is the subject. Let's look at an example now of how to rearrange formula or change the subject. So, in this first example, a is equal to 4r plus 9. The goal is, you'd be told this in the question, but the goal is to make r the subject of this equation. Okay, so it's the same thing as manipulating equations. And it's like the linear equations video from before. To manipulate equations, you must do the same to both sides because you must treat it like two scales in balance with each other. So the first thing we can do is we could take away 9 from both sides. Okay, if I take away 9 from the left hand side, I'm left with a minus 9. And on the right hand side, I'd just be left with 4r. From here, I want r to be the subject, so I want to get r on its own. In order to do that, I must divide both sides by 4. Okay? If I divide the left hand side by 4, well, I have to divide both terms by 4, or the whole side by 4. So I'd be left with a minus 9, all divided by 4. Dividing the right hand side by 4, I get 4r over 4. Okay? Now I can simplify the right hand side. I'll write the left hand side first, a minus 9 over 4. Now the 4's cancel on the right hand side, so I'm just left with r. Okay, now r is isolated on one side. Now in order to make r the subject, it's probably best to write r is equal to a minus 9 over 4. This is the final answer. R is now the subject. Okay, if you're looking for the three-letter word beginning with A, it's ape. Let's look at a second example now. This example is no more complicated than the first, but it will just give you a sense of how to do these. So, c is equal to 2m squared minus 3. Notice how this equation is no longer linear because we've got powers. Okay, so this equation, we could say it was quadratic in fact, because there's a quadratic term, that squared term. So the goal is in this equation to make m the subject. So we need to get m on one side on its own. We can use the same ideas as balancing equations, so we can add things and take away things from both sides. So the first thing I'm going to do is add 3 to both sides. When I add 3 to the left hand side, I get c plus 3. When I add c to the right hand side, I'm left with 2m squared. That minus 3 goes. Okay. Right, 2m squared then. We need to somehow get m on its own. Let's just look at the right hand side. This is 2 multiplied by m squared. And we somehow need to undo that and get m on its own. So I'm doing this because some people get confused with how to undo this. So 2m squared. If we think about what happens to m, we square it and then we multiply by 2 to get 2m squared. What we do not do, I'll go back, sorry. What we do not do is we do not times it by 2 and then square it. Okay? That, if we were to do that, that would be 2m all squared. Okay, so the correct one is we square m and then we multiply by 2. So we have to undo that. So in order to undo that and go back, we have to divide by 2 first. Okay, so on the left hand side we get c plus 3 divided by 2. On the right hand side, I could write this as 2m squared divided by 2. The 2's would cancel. So I rewrite that equation as c plus 3 over 2 is equal to m squared. Okay, now I've got m squared, so I could square root both sides. I'm going to square root the right hand side first, I'll just be left with m. The square root of m squared is m. If I square root the left hand side, I have to square root the whole side, so I'd be left with c plus 3 divided by 2, and the square root of c plus 3 divided by 2. Okay, so now m is the subject. If you're looking for the three-letter word beginning with C, it's can. Okay, I'm going to rub this out and we're going to do one final example. Okay, the third example. I'll write it down. A is equal to C plus D over y squared. Now in this equation, you'll be told that make y the subject. Rearrange to make y the subject. So in order to do this, this is the most complicated of the three examples. Okay, and I'll show you why. The first thing we could do is multiply through by y squared. Okay, I could multiply through by y squared. Now on the left-hand side, if I multiply by y squared, I get ay squared. On the right-hand side, I have to multiply both terms by y squared. Okay, this is one of the most common errors, not to times the whole side by y squared. So it's not c plus d. That's not multiplying by y squared. I have to multiply both terms by y squared. If I multiply the c by y squared, I get cy squared. If I multiply the d over y squared, I could write this as dy squared over y squared. Okay? Notice how both terms, how all terms have been multiplied by y squared. You've got ay squared is equal to cy squared plus dy squared over y squared. Okay, the y squareds cancel here and here, so I could rewrite this as ay squared is equal to cy squared plus d. Okay, this is where it gets complicated because you've got y squareds on both sides now. How do you make y the subject? Okay, so the first thing you want to do is to get the y's onto one side, the y terms. Doesn't matter that there's coefficients, it doesn't matter there's an a and a c there, you want to get the y squareds onto one side. So what we can do now is we could take away cy squared. Okay, that's take away, if I go back a couple of steps, take away cy squared. Okay, and take away cy squared on the right hand side as well. So I take away cy squared on the left hand side. Yes, so if I take away cy squared on the left hand side, I get ay squared minus cy squared. On the right hand side, that cy squared would cancel out, and I'd just be left with d. So now, how do I make y the subject? The first thing, if you notice on the left hand side, you've got these common factors of y squared. Now we know from factorising that I can factor out the y squared. So I could write y squared brackets a minus c. Okay? I could keep it the same, so on the right hand side I get d. So we're almost there. The next thing to do would be to treat this a minus c as an object. We can divide through by a minus c. Okay? And we can divide through by a minus c on the other side. So if I divide through by a minus c on the left hand side, I would get y squared brackets a minus c all over a minus c. And on the right hand side, I would get d over a minus c. Now notice how the a minus c's, that brackets, they cancel. So I'd be left with y squared is equal to d over a minus c. We're very close now. All we have to do is get y on its own on one side, so we could square root both sides. If I square root the left hand side, I get y, and if I square root the right hand side, I get the square root of d over a minus c. Y is now the subject of this equation. This is quite a difficult concept, so do watch through this video again and see if you can understand all the steps. Okay, this was probably the most important step, factorising out the y squared. This is as complicated as these rearranging formulae get at GCSE. If you're looking for the three-letter word beginning with S, it's sin. Thank you for watching.